Everybody, we will get started, I think. Got a bit to get through. So we won't keep you longer than about an hour. Um, Thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar. It's been a little while between drinks. We've been busy over here on the AIM side of things, but we're glad to be back on track and able to bring you new speakers and new topics. So, in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to the elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. I'm lucky enough today to be speaking to you from Tangyuang country in Victoria. Let us know in the chat which land you are on today. So, if we haven't met before, my name is Nell Thompson. I'm the Secretary of the Australian Institute of Animal Management, and I'll be hosting and delivering the webinar for you today. So, the Australian Institute of Animal Management, or as we call it, AIM, is the national peak body representing local government animal management officers. The AIM committee consists of a wide range of professionals engaged in the various aspects of animal management. We seek to support those engaged in the business of animal management and the function itself by providing training and information, opportunities for networking and collaboration, and by encouraging the use of best practice policy and practices. And on the note of networking and information sharing, our registrations are now open for this year's workshops, which will be held in Hobart in October. So jump on the website to learn more about that and book your seat. It will be a load of fun. So we welcome new members. If you have colleagues that aren't yet AIM members, please head them over to the AIM website at www.aim.org.au and they can complete a registration application online. But for today, we will be having around 50 minutes of presentation and then around 10 to 15 minutes of question time once the presentation is concluded. The recording of this webinar will be accessible via our website to all members to watch at any time. I'm going to ask that everyone mutes themselves during the presentation, and if you have questions, you can start putting them in the Q&A section, and then we'll get through as many as we can at the end of the session. If you have quick questions that relate to your understanding of the content, put your hand up, and I'm happy to get to those during the presentation if we can interrupt Daniel briefly. If you have more questions or we don't get to yours during the question time, you can send a message to our Facebook page or mail us and we'll get to it that way. But today I'm very happy to introduce Daniel Kennedy, our presenter for today's session. Daniel has dedicated 17 years to local government, primarily in leadership, compliance and animal management and care roles. In December 2023, he was appointed as the Project Director for Animal Care and Impounding Services at Wollongong City Council. And in this role, Daniel is responsible for implementing the Council's newly established Animal Care and Impounding Service, which includes setting the strategic direction for the next 3 to 5 years. Over the past 18 months, Daniel has overseen the implementation of one of the largest foster care programs in local government, with more than 250 registered foster carers and over 800 foster placements since the program commenced. His extensive experience and commitment to animal welfare ensure the community receives high quality, compassionate and responsive animal care services. So thank you, Daniel. Over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nell. Just before I forget to, with the questions I'm essentially speaking to just a screen, so I might need you to help me out. And if there are questions throughout, just to interrupt me, and because I can't see them from my view at the moment. So
Yep, we can do that, no problem.
awesome. Alrighty. Just before I kick off, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today. I'm fortunate enough to be on Darwin country. I want to also pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here with us today. All right, so building a foster care program, it's easier than you think. I suppose today's presentation has been really geared around how we can go about building a foster care program in a local government setting. There are some out there already doing it, but I'd really just want to, I suppose, speak to my experience, our learnings, and if there is anyone out there that's keen to sort of start putting one together, there's hopefully a few things in here that you can utilise to help get yours off the ground, and some things to keep an eye out for. I have made the slides really resource heavy. There's a lot of words on them, so I apologise for that. But I've done so, I suppose on the basis that it's sorry. I've done so on the basis of that people can come back to them and read them later on. Really sorry. I should have turned this off beforehand. I Sorry, I'm just going to fix that quickly just so I'm not continually interrupted. Apologies, everyone. Okay, hopefully that worked. Sorry, kicking off. So why foster care is becoming so critical? So as we all know, I think everyone is faced with the same challenge at the moment, that the demand continues to grow for facilities, capacity, staffing, budgets, everything associated with animal care. And it's a case at the moment. I know with a lot of councils, you could build, you could double your capacity within your facility and still feel like it isn't enough. This is a large part of the reason why foster care programs are becoming more of a critical element of your service, rather than now just a nice to have. I think for a long time they have been in that nice to have a space. They're sort of got a warm and fuzzy feeling attached to them, but it is now sort of getting into that space where these have such a significant impact on the role and function of your service and the outputs of your service, that we need to sort of start looking at them in that light, and getting our senior leaders to also look at them in that light. I think is really important too. There's some dot points there I've listed, so that prior to us implementing a foster care model, we had a number of challenges that were, limited space during peak intake periods, increased stress and deteriorating welfare outcomes for animals, higher operational costs associated with housing animals long term, increased pressure on staff, that then in turn having an impact on their well-being and their mental health. These are all things that can somewhat be addressed with a foster care program. It's obviously not a silver bullet. It's not going to fix every little issue within the service, but it definitely is a big help. So just to give a bit of an overview of our foster care program, it was designed as scalable and operationally integrated, rather than a small sort of volunteer-driven initiative, which a lot of these programs are. A big aspect of our program that I think is attributed to a success is a zero cost to carer approach. So what that basically means is we supply everything. We supply food, bedding, leashes, for cats, cat litter, cat trays, toys, veterinary care, pretty much everything you need to care for an animal, we provide it, and we even go a little bit over with some of those things as well. So for cats, it might be cat scratch posts and all these types of things as well. Things that you may say, well, they aren't 100% necessary, but to assist the carer and the animal, we provide those as well. I know what a lot of people are probably thinking, that's huge costs associated with that, but I'll talk to you about that a little bit further in the presentation. So that was a big part of what we wanted to do when we set up our program. what we've noticed with the animals placed into foster care is it's, you know, we try to focus it initially around the animals requiring additional behaviour support, animals recovering from mental conditions or procedures, long-term or harder to rehome animals, and then obviously neonates and litters of kittens or vulnerable animals requiring monitoring. What we've, whilst they are obviously the ones that we try to push into foster care, we've also gone with the model of if someone wants to take it into foster, let it go into foster. We're not trying to hold any animals back, with the exception of there being a safety concern involved. You know, the animal is highly aggressive, or there's an issue there with even sometimes with the owner. If we know that the owner is aggressive themselves, and there's a chance there that they may see that dog out in the community whilst it's in foster care. We try to avoid that also. Um, yeah, but I think, and I've sort of got a note there at the end to say that, that importantly the program was embedded into the daily operations. Again, it wasn't just a side project. It was definitely something that we wanted to make it a part of our core operation and a core focus as well. And it's not a nice to have program that turns on and off. It's essentially a program that runs forever and a day now. So okay, so getting into I suppose the approval pathways. We we were a little bit lucky in the sense of, we were in a bit of a dire situation. We'd had our impounding service contractor withdraw from providing us that service, and we were left in the lurch a little bit and in a difficult position to provide the service to the scale that we needed to. So we were able to sort of help that to push the approval through. But I think, like anything in a local government setting, it requires a structure and evidence-based approach, and that's a lot of that's due to, the legal, operational, and reputational risks that are involved. So, for us, the development process included conducting industry research and engaging with other organisations to understand those risks and the benefits of foster care programs. If there is anyone here today that is really quite serious about that, I would strongly encourage them to do that, whether that's by talking to us at Wollongong or talking to other councils, or we spoke to other organisations such as the AWL and Sydney Dogs and Cats Home and got an idea how their programs worked. I think it's a key point to this, because there's so much information out there, and there's so much information out there that can support your business case to get these programs up off the ground. Things that you're probably not even realising that it's so beneficial to go and talk to these other organisations or other councils and get that information from them. We also completed a really detailed risk assessment, identifying the potential issues such as, liability, animal behaviour, all those all those things that are probably popping into people's heads around, well, what happens if the dog goes home and chews up their $4,000 leather lounge, or if unfortunately the dog does become aggressive and bite someone or bite another animal, how are all those risks managed? And I think the important approach to take with this is it's not to try not to hide from the risks that are present. They're there and they need to be acknowledged and addressed. And I think sort of coming at them head on is the best approach, and that's definitely what we did. We didn't try to say that, it's nothing to be concerned about, don't look here. We definitely acknowledged there was risk there, but we put a lot of effort into how we would address those risks. Even things like, when an animal escapes foster care, once we find the animal, do we then return it? Yes or no? First time is yes. If it happens again, we don't return it. We take it back into a facility, because there's obviously a risk there that the dog's an escape artist and the foster carer can't contain it. But in that first step also, we offered some scaled assistance. So do they need anything else from us to contain the dog onto their property? So little things like that are a big way of addressing the risk. So and again, strongly suggest this next point to anyone considering it is implement an internal pilot program first to sort of test assumptions and validate controls. We were quite lucky. We done that first, and we've got around 1,500 staff at Wollongong, so we had a sort of fair chunk of people sign up for it straight away that we could start testing the program with. That's where a lot of your key learnings are going to come from. You're also avoiding I suppose, the criticism from, members of the public or um, external stakeholders such as the media and so on, because they're obviously not aware of the program because it's being managed internally. And it's a really good, I suppose, try before you buy almost moment if you go down that pilot program. And this last point here is obviously a must do anyway, but engaging with your senior and executive management throughout the process to build the trust, address concerns, and ensure alignment with organisational priorities. So if one thing I always remember is that our senior and executive leaders often don't have an in-depth knowledge about how our services work. They have a high-level understanding, which is obviously natural, but that's where it's difficult for them to understand how the risk is going to be managed because they don't have an in-depth understanding. So take the time, if you have the opportunity, to work with them, show them what you're planning, the risks that are present, how you're going to address those. And again, that's something we can help. That's something we can definitely help with. And I've just got that last line there, just to focus on that. The staged approach was critical in moving the concept from a perceived risk to a supported operational initiative. So that definitely that internal pilot program was a big assist in that space. So with regards to our program design and our key decisions, as mentioned at the start, there was sort of several key decisions through the development of the program, which has been fundamental to its success. Again, just noting on that again, it's that zero cost model. That ensures that there's no financial barriers and it doesn't limit participation. You need to remember too, a lot of people, your best foster carers are going to be often people that aren't in a position to work for whatever reason. They may be retired, they may be, they may be recovering from an injury, they may be unable to find work at the time, and looking for something to do to fill in that time. So they're usually your most engaged. So if you have a cost barrier there in place for them, it becomes less likely they're going to sign up for the program. Another thing we wanted to make sure we'd done, which again mitigated some of those risks, is have a formal foster care agreement. So we worked with our legal team to develop that. Clearly, it defines the roles and responsibilities and expectations around the animal care, vet treatment, incidents, indemnity protections, all those things. So the way our agreement is set up, and I'll be happy to share this with anyone that's looking to put a program in place, is essentially we shift all liability back onto the foster carer. So if it's essentially they do so at their own risk. So if they do have a new $5,000 little lounge and the first thing the dog does is goes in and chews a big hole in it, well, unfortunately, that's on them. They're welcome to bring the dog back. Obviously, we will take the dog back into care, and we don't ever force a foster arrangement, but the actual damage to property and costs involved is borne by the foster care and not by council. I think this last one's really important too. The program is centrally coordinated, and it allows for those consistent decisions, appropriate matching of animals to carers, effective oversight. So with us, we do have a dedicated foster care and rehoming officer. I can understand there's a lot of people in the room now probably going, well, I'm not going to be able to get an extra position at the moment, or our budget's not going to allow for it. And that's okay. It's not a necessity, but it certainly makes life a lot easier to have someone dedicated to the program. If you are going to try to run the program within your current staffing establishment and not seek an extra position, my recommendation would be, if possible, is to still try and get one person responsible for program oversight. It's definitely definitely a must on our end. We need that one person to have that oversight over the entire program. Anything less than that would be a bit of a fail for us, unfortunately. Um, so just wrapping up this slide, these decisions ensure that the program could scale with maintaining consistency, accountability, and safety. Okay, managing risk at scale. So I think this is probably one of the most important sort of points to discuss today, because that anyone that's trying to get approval from senior or executive management around the establishment of the programs, this is what, particularly executive, this is going to be the first thing they want to talk about is your risk and how do you manage it. So the key risks there are obviously animals escaping from foster homes, changes in animal behaviour, including aggression, injury or damage to people or property, theft or loss of animals, managing euthanasia decisions for animals in care. So a number of things, and I've already touched on a couple of them, we'll put in place to manage those risks. As I said, we have a scaled response approach to animals escaping and how we manage that. We also, there's the placing the right animal with the right foster care is important in that respect also. A lot of these are addressed through our foster care agreement and ensuring that there is no liability on council when it comes to damage of people or property. Um, Really open communication channels are important, is especially when those changes in behaviour. We want the foster carers to be comfortable to call us and say, there's been this change in behaviour. What do I do, or can I return it? We even provide weekend options for returns. And with the regards to the injury to the animal itself in care, again, that's addressed through the provision of pretty much 24-hour veterinary access if needed. The loss of animals is an interesting one. So we've had probably, I would say, since the program started, a dozen animals escape foster care. In all but one case, they're usually returned within half an hour. In some of those cases, then they do, the foster carer decides themselves that they don't want to care for the animal anymore and drops it in at our contracted vet clinic. But in most cases, they're returned quite quickly, just simply through the collar and tag we place on the animal before it goes into care. Always been dogs. We have lost a couple of cats, but they've, usually ended up in a hiding spot in the house somewhere where the foster carer can't find them. We have had one um, one instance of a dog getting out and escaping, and that dog was unfortunately never found again. Um, Fortunately, in that instance, there was no attempt to reclaim the dog, and the owner never came forward. And yeah, that's obviously something you want to avoid. And just to note that that dog had escaped a few times on the foster care, and we didn't at that point have the um, scaled approach of providing additional assistance and then removing the animal from foster care when that occurred. But even though that's, it's a um, definite negative that one occurring, we, when you look at the stats, it's 1 out of 800 that's happened with. We, we can wear that risk, and we're comfortable to do so. The only other time that we've had an animal removed from foster care without our permission is when a owner came forward. The person who found the animal placed something up on Facebook. They then took the animal in to be impounded. They then offered to take it into foster care. So we let the animal go into foster care with them. The owner then found the Facebook post, turned up on this person's doorstep, was a bit of an unsavoury character, and basically demanded that the dog be handed over to him, which they did, which we would expect them to do. Their safety was paramount in that situation. At the end of the day, we lost out on a couple of impounding fees and a registration fee that we can address through other means by sending them a notice under the Act to register. So at the end of the day, we look at the pros in that space as well, that the animal was reunited and we didn't have to try to rehome this animal down the track. But there was definitely some learnings for us there as well. Some other points there to that, mitigating the risk is around behavioural and health assessment prior to placement. That's something that's really important that we've learned throughout, I suppose, the implementation of the program. And again, really strong communication with carers, particularly in complex or sensitive situations. So there have been a couple of times now where we've had to make the decision to euthanize an animal, mainly for welfare reasons, whilst it's in foster care. To be honest, it's like anything. Honesty is the best policy in that space, and we find that if we involve the foster carer in that conversation and have them as a participant, not as a not as a spectator. So we don't get them there and just tell them what is going to happen. We involve them in the conversation and somewhat involve them in the decision making also. It makes it easier for them and it makes them more understanding of the situation. And we've dealt with that situation a few times now, and we really haven't had any, significant issue arise from it. So, alrighty, next. So good segue into the next slide, which is supporting foster carers. So it's it's another critical success factor for us is that the level of support we provide to the carers. So that comes through, not just that zero cost model. It comes through a structured onboarding process to ensure carers understand the expectations, ongoing communication, including regular check-ins, and availability support if issues arise. Obviously, as I mentioned, the provision of supplies, and clear escalation pathways for behavioural and medical concerns. So giving them that information up front. We've even got little things like fridge magnets that talk about what to do after hours if there is an issue and who to call and who to speak with. That's a big part of it. And recruiting what foster carers is one thing, but retention is a completely different part of it. And it's something that if anyone is going to start a program, I encourage you to give some good thought to. So rushing out, setting up a few stalls in a couple of markets and doing some Facebook posts and signing up, 100 foster carers isn't the hard part. It's retaining them and getting them to understand what they're signing up for and how they can participate in the program in a positive way. Expectation settings, is a huge part of this. As we all know through the members of the community we deal with in regards to the other areas of our business, there's often a misunderstanding of what we're actually doing in this space and what we're trying to achieve. So really clear expectation settings with your foster carers is super important. And if you don't, there is a likelihood they're going to disengage. So very good. On the next one. So talking about the operational and financial impact now. So just a couple of things before we get into this slide. I want to be really clear. This is based on our cost model. So these are going to be different and you probably need to go away and work these out for yourself to a degree. But again, we're happy to assist with that if you're struggling to do it. So what we've broken it down to is a 14-day period for keeping a dog in foster care compared to a facility and same with a cat. It's interesting, it's actually more expensive to keep a cat in foster care than it is a dog, but then those numbers flip when it goes to a facility environment. Well, that's the case for us anyway. So, but you can see there for us to put a dog into foster care for 14 days costs us about $180. And that's compared to the $840 in facility costs. For a cat, $230 for foster care and $630 for a facility setting. One other thing to note, these costs don't include the costs that would apply in both settings. So veterinary costs aren't included there, or anything that would apply in both a foster and a facility setting aren't applied because that obviously zero each other out anyway. So what that $180 and $230 is essentially your supplies. The other important point to notice is a lot of those supplies that are provided can be reused. So, bowls, litter trays, all these types of things. So, but we go with the approach of pretty much if we're sending it out, we're not expecting it to come back. And if you go with any other approach, I can probably guarantee that you're going to be dismally disappointed, because most of the stuff you send out won't come back. And it's not so much that the foster carers are, taking advantage of the program or anything like that. A lot of it is just people are generally busy. They bring the animal back to be adopted, and they say, "I'll drop the stuff off next week," and it just never comes around. Um, in a lot of we have some foster carers we actually tell not to bother bringing the stuff back because they're active foster carers and they'll continue to use it. So yeah, it's yeah. So and I suppose just to note there too that beyond the direct cost savings, foster care also provides those other things that are listed. So increased capacity within impounding facilities, reduced stress for animals, leading to improved health and behaviour, higher quality information about animals, improving rehoming success, more efficient use of staff time and resources. Well, if you adopt one of these programs, and you've probably seen the photos, all these photos in this presentation are from foster carers. These are the type of photos we're getting, even those ones that are on the screen now. Even just using those in your animal profiles and on your websites and social media pages will push your rehoming stats, through the roof in comparison. I don't have the stats on it, but we've seen it 1,000 times now. We've got really good facilities that we work with, and this isn't a slide on them, but we'll have a really good, robust profile built for the animal in care. We'll have lots of nice photos of it in the facility, out playing in the grass, interacting with other animals, all those types of things. We don't even get a whimp of interest in the animal. We throw these types of photos up where people can visualize the animal in their home, sleeping on their couch or whatever the photo depicts. And within 48 hours, we've got half a dozen adoption requests. There's obviously, and I'm not trained in that space, I'm not going to talk about it too much. There's obviously some sort of psychological thing going on there where people can then visualize the animal in their home. So then it makes it easier for them to take that next step. But it's literally crazy the improvement you'll see in that space. Um, so the benefits, yeah, just that last note there, the benefits combine to create a model that's both financially sustainable and operationally effective. And look, just to give an indication of how much this will assist with capacity and cost savings and that, and appreciate a lot of you probably have your own facilities and this won't really apply, but for us who use contracted facilities, when we started, we leased 30 dog kennels. Within 12 months of running the program, we were able to renegotiate our contract and bring that down to 25 kennels, which still, for a council that impounds, anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 animals a year, to only operate with 25 dog kennels, I think is an indicator in itself of the success of the program. And we only really have 30 cat enclosures as well. So, and that's all attributed to the foster care program. More often than not now, we've got 70-80% of our animals in care. I think it was only a couple of weeks ago, I looked at some numbers. I had 100 cats in care in total, 20 were in facilities, 80 were in foster care. So just those type of numbers. The ability to hold the animals for extended periods, that obviously increases the amount of animals you have in your care, but it drastically reduces your euthanasia rates and so on as well. So some outcomes and lessons learned. So there was obviously, as I mentioned then, a significant number of animals successfully placed into foster care, reduced pressure on our facilities. We have higher rates of adoptions, including foster fails, where carers choose to adopt the animal they're caring for. They're bittersweet. It's obviously great to rehome the animal permanently, but often in that case you lose a foster carer as well. But it's we're outcomes driven here. We'd rather see the animal get a home and then maintain that foster carer. As mentioned, then we extend periods of euthanasia for capacity management. So yeah, we will sometimes, and look, I know everyone's different in this space, and there may be some people here that work in zero kill facilities and so on. When not one of those. But what we are proud to say is that we can go often 4 to 5, sometimes 6 months now without looking at euthanasia in animal purely based for capacity reasons. There's euthanasia still occurring for other reasons, welfare and the dog's declared dangerous and it can't legally be rehomed, but purely for capacity management, we're often not looking to euthanize an animal for those reasons. This last point here, which is probably something I haven't really touched on too much, but strong engagement from the community, improving council's reputation and connection with residents. This was huge for us. When we took over the service, we were heavily criticised by not only our community, but local rehoming groups and so on about council's inability to act in this space. And this was achieved through, I suppose, various methods, but the foster care program, I think, really demonstrated that we were willing to walk the walk here, not just talk the talk, and that animal well-being and outcomes for animals is important for us, and that we didn't want to have what I call an old school impounding system where animals come in, they're given a set allocation of days, and if it's not rehomed within that day, well, then that's just bad news. It showed that we were really invested into looking at it through a new set of lenses, essentially. So the several important lessons that emerged were starting with a pilot program. It's critical to success. Having that strong governance and structure must be in place from the beginning. Foster care support needs to be prioritised early. Strong comms internally and externally is also essential. Foster care should be embedded as a core operational function, not treated as an optional program. So I think that's a good point to end there on, is that that's the mindset that needs to be adopted with these programs. It's not, as I said at the start, it's not this nice to have thing that gives us a bit of good press and we throw one or two animals into every now and then. For these to really succeed, you really need to look at them in that light, that they are that core operational function. So a framework for other councils. So I believe our model can be adopted by other councils, regardless of size, provided a structured approach is followed. So I think, like any council, you've got to start building a clear business case, highlighting both welfare and financial benefits. And I think that can be easily proven and demonstrated, even just using statistics from our program. Undertaking a detailed risk assessment and identifying those mitigation strategies, implementing a small-scale pilot program to test assumptions and build evidence, developing governance structures, including agreement procedures and oversight mechanisms. Those things even come down to keeping registers of what products are being handed out to foster carers, food, bedding, all that sort of stuff. We have had a couple of cases where there were some people that were using the program to provide, food and stuff for their own animals, and that was picked up through that they were going through their food and bedding and the like much more quickly than they should have. So scaling the program gradually while maintaining strong support systems and data tracking. So scaling the program, I think that's something that happens naturally as well. And really, depending on the amount of resource that you're willing to contribute to the program, will determine the scale and size of it. So we are nearing the point now, and we're starting to look at this from a staffing perspective and staff resourcing perspective. We're probably nearing the point now, we're probably already there, where our program can no longer be managed by one person just due to its size and scale. So we need to start having a serious look at that, and whether or not we want to put a pin in the program and say, well, that's it. It's operating at its max, and start looking at only bringing foster carers on when others go out and so on. But or we need to look at additional staffing to expand the program further. That's where I want to go to, because I believe, I suppose I'm a big believer in that these programs are the way of the future for councils managing impounded animals, because And someone, a wise person, told me once, if you build 100 kennels, you will fill 100 kennels. So there's only this is, I think the only um, common sense approach moving forward is to look into these type of programs and expand them and build them to the scale that they're needed. And for me, the program isn't big enough until we've gotten to a point where we don't even have capacity euthanasia full stop. That's when your foster care program is big enough in my book. Um, you're always going to need some sort of facility. There's animals that aren't suitable for foster care for well-being reasons or aggression reasons or whatever. But until you can truly remove capacity euthanasia, then your foster care program isn't big enough is the way I look at it. So just to note there as well, so we're happy to support other councils through the provision of templates, resources, direct engagement, shared lessons, anything you think you need. I'm happy to, I actually just thought that I should have put in the presentation. I'm happy to share my email for anyone that wants it. And yeah, you can reach out to me directly. But yeah, we're happy to share whatever we can to get these types of programs off the ground elsewhere. Um, Probably finished up a bit early, but that's it. Questions?
Fantastic. Thank you, Daniel. You could actually pop your email in the chat if you like, and then everyone can have a look at that. We've got some good questions coming in. I'm sure, well, I hope you know that the AIM board are incredibly excited about your foster care program and supportive of it. And we would love to see other councils implementing programs like this. So, very well done. Mel has a question. Do you perform property inspections on applicants? If so, is it in person or virtual?
Um, no, for the most part. So basically, it's sorry, I'm a man. I'm trying to do two things at once here. So I'm just putting my email in the chat.
Fantastic.
No, so look, it's one thing we have learnt, and we've learnt this from other areas as well, is that it's really important to build that trust with your foster carer. So I understand everyone's going to say, yeah, but there's risks and they're taken to the wrong house. The people that are signing up for these programs are the people that genuinely want to help, and for the most part, have that understanding of what they're doing and the common sense applied also. So we find it's too intrusive.
Yeah,
It doesn't people you won't retain your foster carers. I think you'll get the response of essentially, what type of an idiot do you think I am? Of course, I'm
yeah,
going to have the suitable yard for it. What we will do, if there, and there's going to, and I won't go into detail about this, if you get indicators that there is something there to be concerned about, we do a bit of a Google map search and just sort of look and go, okay, that's where the animal's going. And then we might have some more targeted questions when we're placing animals with them. How are your fences? What's this? What's, those types of things. But it's very organic. It's not structured. Yeah, our senior leaders and exec wouldn't like us to say this, but we're going off our gut with a lot of this as well. So,
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. A question from me. How did you get around the insurance issue for, because essentially your foster carers, I guess, are volunteers of council. They're volunteering for council. Is that correct? And if that is correct, were you able to get volunteer insurance for them?
So interestingly, no, they're not volunteers. They
Okay.
are program participants. So similar to if you were running a outreach program through your libraries,
Hmm.
and you were, getting people to sign up for it, it's the same thing. I suppose it's almost framed in the sense in that it's probably not really accurate, but they're they're signing up. It's a benefit for them to sign up for the program rather than volunteering for us. So it's something they want to do. So you'll never see the word volunteer used in any of our
Right.
documentation because we don't treat them as volunteers.
Yeah,
So
it's a good way to get around it. That's
yeah.
cool. All right. And wondering what communication form works best, i.e., email, Facebook Messenger, text.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's something that we're still I suppose, fine tuning to a degree.
Mm,
I had a meeting before this webinar today talking about this is one of the subjects itself. So we find email is probably the best.
mhm,
Calls, some people prefer to call, and that's okay.
mhm.
But what we're finding now is due to the scale of our program, I think we've got about 70 active foster carers at the moment. That's 70 people that usually want to talk to you every 1 or 2 days. So it's a bit of a workload there.
Yeah,
So we encourage email. We've tried to cut down inquiries that don't need to be inquiries. So we might get, oh, I need, an extra bag of kitty litter and that. We've now sort of set up other mechanisms to say, well, rather than emailing us, we're here between these hours, just come and pick it up. Like we don't
nice.
want to know about what you need, just come
Yep.
and grab it. And then we're now looking at also, I suppose, just to allow the foster care and rehoming officer to get to some other things,
Mhm.
restricting some access, restricted, I suppose, access for the foster carers. So essentially putting out some comms from to say that the foster care and rehoming officer will be available between, we're thinking at this stage, 9 and 12 o'clock.
Right.
And, if give us a call if there's something else that pops up outside of that time. So,
Yeah, great. Okay. Um, what hurdles did you need to overcome to get the program running initially? And if there were hurdles, how did you approach them?
I think a lot of covered off in the presentation. It was really those, and look, every council's going to do. A lot of them was just around the risk.
Mm.
Everyone we talked to about it, they sort of went, "Oh no, oh,
Mm.
it's risky." Well, yeah, we know.
Yeah.
And look, I think good, there's some really good points there to raise in that space. Undertaking roadworks is risky as well. Operating
Mhm.
a landfill is risky.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Having lifeguards on your beaches is
Yeah.
risky. We do risk all the time.
Mm.
It's a different type of risk, and that's,
Mhm.
I think, a really important thing to draw.
Mm.
And now something you and I've talked about before. Unfortunately, there is a culture across most local governments. When it comes to risk, it's easier for me to say no than it is to say yes, and
Definitely. Yep.
that's what most people will be usually faced with, unless
Yep.
you've got someone really progressive in your leadership structure that's going, oh, okay, let's have a look at this.
Yep.
And it's part of the reason why I wanted to do these presentations is I want
Yes.
people to come in with the ability to say, yeah, I know you're going to talk about risk, but here's
Hmm.
how we're going to address all of those, and
Yep.
almost lead with a front foot. So,
Yeah. Amazing. How does vet care work? Is there 24/7 support and is there a cap on a budget for each animal in your care?
we have a contracted vet clinic that has takes all our animals in from intake, and that's where we do all our dissecting procedures and stuff. So during their hours of operation, which we're fortunate are 8 to 6 most days, and then 8 to 8 on a few other days.
Hmm.
In the hours of operation, the foster carer can take the animal there and just mention the animal's impounding number that they're a foster carer.
Hmm.
The vets will take it from there. We also have a 24-hour vet in Wollongong that we tell foster carers if they assess the situation as urgent, and you've just got to operate with a bit of blind faith here to
Yep.
take it to that 24-hour vet. I've probably had 3 or 4 taken there in the time we've ran the program,
Right.
and they're all situations where I would say, yeah, it
Mm.
was needed.
Yep.
You're going to be limited, but to the veterinary services in your area, and you can only
Yes.
offer what you can offer. And the thing to remember here is always draw comparison back to a facility environment.
Yep.
Um, if you don't have vets that are sitting at a facility all night, is it that big of an issue if you can't provide them to foster carers overnight?
Yep.
Um, in saying that, you don't want to put your foster carers under, undue stress and anxiety in that situation.
Hmm.
But even if you set them up to say, do what you can, monitor the animal, treat it as if it was your animal, what you would
Yep.
do, and then call us first thing in the morning. And again, that sort of stems back to this really open and clear communication with your foster
Mm.
carers and treating them as a service partner, not as a,
Yes.
as a participant or is yeah. You'll probably. I can't foresee most people running into many issues in that space. There's always your outliers, but you're going to have really crazy situations that can never be sort of addressed through these risk assessments and that. But And then as far as the cap, we have, so it's not so much a cap, we have a $500 spend with our vets. We tell the vets that unless they believe that it's going to be a welfare case that we can't financially afford to provide ongoing care for, spend up to $500, which usually covers, basic meds, X-rays, blood tests, those types of things. If they then go past that, we've got a process where they call me to approve further treatment, and then we
Right.
usually there's a system we use around. Um, it's not the nicest subject, but we sort of have to look at, well, obviously cost. We have
Hmm.
to look at the likelihood of the animal being reclaimed, the
Yep.
likelihood of the animal being rehomed, the age of the animal, the
Yep.
desirability of the animal, which is
Hmm.
unfortunate. But we look at all these things and then we make a decision on next
Yep.
steps from there. So if the animal's in foster care is a big one. Because if
Yep.
it's a yes, it's like, well, no, we'll leave it. Well,
Right.
it's so we've got some really good case examples now that if you're willing to, put a little bit of extra effort and time and resource into these animals in foster care, the most, and I had the most undesirable dogs, not from aggressive, not due to aggressive behaviour, but for other reasons, behaviour based and also breed based.
Hmm.
We've been able to keep them in care for 200 days and find them a home at not a significant cost to council.
Amazing.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, so like yeah, these are all, and what we're finding is our service is more now, it's logistics and decision based. That's what we're looking at all the time is,
Yep.
can it logistically work, and what's the decision tree here we need to follow for consistency purposes.
Yeah. Fantastic. What have the effects on the staff involved in the program been? So before you were running this program, how was everyone kind of feeling about their jobs and, day to day sort of culture compared to now?
It's been hugely positive, like a term for positive behavior. There is a but here.
Yeah.
It's, so look, yeah, obviously everyone loves the idea of placing animals into foster care and getting these lovely updates from foster carers and watching the animals go through this, I suppose, full journey of coming into care, going into foster, being rehomed,
Hmm.
successful rehoming outcome, a lot of which is due to the information we've been provided in its foster care placement, which you
Hmm.
don't get in a facility environment. Um, that's great. What we have found, but is that it's that I think every staff member working in this space has this at times, that sense of failure when you can't get an animal adopted.
Hmm.
It almost tenfolds now because it's like, well, I
Right.
can't get it fostered, I can't get it adopted, I can't
Yep.
do anything for it, and it really, there we've got a couple of staff that starts to burden heavily on them, that they feel
Right.
like they can't find any option for the animal.
Hmm.
And then there's a burnout element there of the 5,000 foster call inquiries and things
Right.
like that, and that's an exaggeration, but yeah,
Yes.
there's another side to it too. You just need to be eyes wide open with,
Yeah.
but still worth it every
Yep.
day of the week. So.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Um, does council charge a rehoming or adoption fee to recover costs associated with the care and maintenance of the animals prior to rehoming?
No, so we've got, and we're probably moving away from foster care a little bit. We've got and it's some people see it as lunacy, but we've got a very drastically scaled rehoming rate set up in our council. So basically, we tried to find something that because you're going to get your desirable animals come through that everyone wants to swarm in and adopt straight away.
Mm.
We don't want to be giving them away for pennies,
Mm.
but we also want to have a system that supports the 10,000 staffy that you've had come through for the year.
Exactly.
And how do
Yes.
you get that out the door? So basically, first week of adoption, our dogs are up for $300. Our
Hmm.
cats are up for $200. If they don't get adopted in that first week, it reduces by 50%. So dogs down to 150, um, cats down to 100. If
Hmm.
they don't get adopted in that second week, it scales down again to um, $75 for dogs and $50 for cats. Now, and I was asked this question by our executive, how the fact that you're microchipping, registering, desexing, vaccinating, worming, fleeing, you're doing all these things. How are you ever going to recover that cost?
Yep.
I suppose my answer to that is if you're ever trying to recover costs in animal management, you're in the wrong business. So,
That's exactly right.
but I also look at it in the sense of, and again, really easy for me to demonstrate because we work through all contracted services at the moment.
Mhm.
Is I could demonstrate to them for me, and these costs vary for each council. I understand that. But for me, at the end of the day, including the procedure and the arrangements after, it costs me about $400 to euthanize an animal.
Yep.
So we even take that $50 cat to do all
Yes.
those other things we talked about, probably costs around $400.
Yep.
So, yep, I'm not making any money,
Yep.
but the alternative is to make no money and then
Mhm.
spend this money
Yep.
on the other option.
Yep.
So, and I've sort of put that question back to our executive. So, what is it that you would prefer? I would
Yes.
rather the reputation that comes with the $50 cat sale
Yep.
than the $400 euthanasia. So, it's about changing the mindset in that space a little bit too. But so yeah, no, we don't offset any costs. We're far from
No.
offsetting costs.
Yep.
So, but it's well, it depends how you look at it. I suppose is the answer to the question because
Yeah, I mean, you're offsetting costs by putting them into foster to begin with.
yeah,
And I think if you asked your average community member, which way would you prefer to go? Would you like to have a live release outcome, adopted into a home or, a non-live release outcome? They're always going to be supportive of you doing those sorts of things. So there's budget to be thought about, but also how the community's feeling about, the whole program. Another question, what is the meet and greet process for the adoption of pets in foster care?
Um, again, something that we've toyed around with a little bit. We probably stupidly in the beginning even done a few meet and greets at the foster carer's household. That quickly became a no-no, just because we had no control over that setting. And interestingly enough, we then sort of we've now moved to they all meet and greets happen at our offices where we're based in Wollongong. That's whether they're in a facility or in foster care. So we usually get the foster care to drop it off. We've actually now gone the complete other way, and we get the foster care to drop it off about 15 minutes early or earlier, whatever they need. And like, we get some people who drop them off at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the meet and greet's not until 2.
Okay.
And we've got some kennels and enclosures to keep them in for the day.
Mhm.
Um, but we try to actually keep the foster carers out of the meet and greet
Right.
because they naturally try to take over.
Mhm.
They sometimes, it's not that they provide information that they shouldn't, but some of these people are really passionate and
Yep.
they can sometimes deter the adoption from taking place.
Okay.
So we try to get all the information we can off them, but then we don't actually get them to participate in the meet and greet. We
Right.
take over for that degree of separation there. So,
Okay. Yep. Now I'm going to wrap the last couple of questions all up into one so that we can not go over time too much. But do you have an application form which gets information about what sort of dog would suit a foster carer?
yeah.
Also, is there any training that the foster carers receive? And what is in, do they get an information booklet or something like that?
Yes, no, and yes. So, no, so we there is a form that goes out. We've done some work on that space. It's all in electronic form now, and it basically, um, when we get that information back, we then populate that into our overall foster care register.
Hmm.
And even these types of things, we're happy to share these and show you how they work because a
Right.
lot of it is record keeping. It's a big part of it.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, there definitely is a form that goes out, and each council will probably adjust that to what they want to have on there and what they're trying to capture.
Okay.
Um, but the training at the moment is a no.
Hmm.
We try to provide our own, I suppose, informal training and give them advice and tell them from our experiences what would work. But we are looking into, they're actually an American-based organization called Pet Academy,
Yep.
and we're looking at utilizing them for this purpose. So
Perfect.
that it comes at an extremely low cost to council. Essentially, the foster carer can message Pet Academy and get a response in 24 hours about what they need to do and
Yep.
yeah, provide assistance and support. So, and yeah, we've got heaps of information packs that we send out. So, and that's something we've developed over time. You know, the big one in that space is informing the foster carer about how that animal is going to settle into their home and what they need to give the animal to do that.
Hmm.
The amount of times in the beginning we would have people call up and say, the cat's hidden under the lounge and it hasn't moved for 24 hours. I want to bring it back. It's like,
Hmm.
well, you'd probably do the same thing. So
Yeah.
just give it a
Yep.
break. But I think being upfront with that information and sharing it with them and say, yeah, if in a week the cat's still doing that, we might need to have a look at it. But
Sure.
essentially just getting used to its new environment and cut it some slack. And but yeah, so yeah,
Okay. Yeah, Pet Academy is a great resource. One very quick last question. I know that this is on a lot of people's minds. If in the event that a dog in foster care was involved in a dog attack or some kind of incident like that, um, would the foster carer be considered the person in control from a liability point of view, or would it be the council? How do you sort of deal with that? Or how would you if it was to happen?
yeah. And look, I'd like to think that the pre-screenings and things that take place is that it wouldn't happen. But I
Mm.
suppose that's you can. Yeah, it's something there's always a chance of it, especially with dog behaviour. It can change, but it's to be completely honest, something I haven't given a lot of thought to.
Hmm.
Um, Depending on the circumstance, I think would be is the answer. So if it was in the owner's, the foster carer's control at the time, I think there would be some liability on the foster carer there.
Right.
If it escaped the foster carer's property and ran down the street and attacked someone, I'd actually probably even think that the liability probably then sat more back on council
Right.
because we've knowingly let that animal go out into the community again, regardless of our knowledge of its behaviour. But we haven't had an incident of that. We've had plenty of escape artists get out of their foster carers' homes. As I said, probably had a dozen. Not
Yep.
we haven't had one issue with aggressions or attacks. I think that probably comes down to those pre-screenings that we
Yep.
make sure that animal is going to be suitable for a foster care environment. And really, and we it's a part of the reason too why we encourage that clear communication with foster carers too. And we've had to do this. We've had people call up and say, "Oh, dog's really good, but every time my son walks in the room, he starts to growl.
Right.
We just bring it back."
Yep.
Like, it's there'll be a lot of people out there that say, "Oh, you shouldn't just stereotype the dog." We're not stereotyping the dog. We're just
Hmm.
not rolling the dice in that space. We're not
Yep.
going to run it to risk. So,
Yep.
and I think that's important. And in that situation where you may be liable, if you can demonstrate that these are all the measures you put in place to
Hmm.
avoid these risks, I think that's really important in that space. That
Yes.
you know, picture yourself in a courtroom. What do you want to be able to say? And we want to be able to say that our program is based on if we are aware of any aggression issues, that the animal's returned from foster immediately or doesn't go into foster in the first place.
Yeah. Yep. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, we're going to wrap up. We're a little bit past 1 o'clock, but thank you so much, Daniel. It has been
Mhm.
a fantastic session. Thank you, everybody, for all the questions. They've been excellent, and I hope that it's given you some confidence to move forward with a program like this for yourselves. Keep an eye on the AME News and social media for any upcoming webinars that we have. And of course, check out the information about our upcoming workshop to be held in Hobart in October. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming along. I really appreciate your time and your time, Daniel, with putting that presentation together and for being so accessible to us all.
No problem.
So take care, everybody, and we will see you at the next one. Thanks very much.
Thank you. See ya.